she had worked out with this group of people who were running a brothel to have me work for them. She traded me and they supplied her coke.
I'm so sorry, human to human, for what you had to go through.
Work on yourself, free yourself, cultivate practices that allow you to connect with your inner world. You'll be able to see more clearly.
What can we do now to wake up to our own power and sovereignty? I recently launched Love Covered Life Academy, where I offer monthly masterclasses at a deeply discounted rate. These courses include profound meditations that will guide you into a deep spiritual connection, monthly teaching videos, and daily practices that we get to do together in community. All this you'll get to experience with a growing community group of conscious, spiritually minded individuals, and monthly live Q&A sessions with me where I deep dive into your spiritual practice with you and answer your questions. Sign up here. I cannot wait to see you there. Before we begin, I'd like to offer a trigger warning for some potentially disturbing topics that we'll be discussing in today's interview. I'm here today with Sarah Lauren, who is one of the most inspiring people I have ever spoken to. She has a history of childhood abuse and exploitation. And today we're going to talk about her journey of alchemizing her trauma into personal power and sovereignty, as well as her psilocybin assisted healing experiences. Thank you for joining me, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So how about if we start with a little bit of your background and whatever details you're comfortable sharing with what happened to you as a child?
Okay, sure. So when my mother was pregnant with me, she had some physical ailments that caused her to have seizures and some mental difficulties in diagnosis, like bipolar. And so she didn't know if she was going to be able to take care of me. And she considered abortion or adoption. And she ended up having me, not aborting me, obviously, because I'm here. But she had a very difficult upbringing herself. She grew up in the foster care system, and she was physically, emotionally, and mentally abused her whole life. So she was operating from a lower consciousness level. And she ended up meeting a family who are my family now. They fostered me for 5 years, and I was back and forth with her and them, and then they adopted me when I was 5. And we kind of wrote letters a little bit back and forth, but I lost touch with her when we moved away. And I always wondered about her. I think some are just fine with not knowing anything, but I wanted to know everything. I have always been that way. I want to know the truth. It's like I'm wired to seek truth. And so I did. I just kept looking for her. And then when I was 18, I found her and she lived close to me. So she called my cell phone and invited me over the next morning. I think she said something like 8 o'clock, and I thought 8 o'clock p.m. She said, no, in the morning. And I remember when I got over there and she opened the door, it was like, I was so excited and relieved. Like I had been waiting for this moment my whole life. And we hit it off right away. And at this stage in my human development, I was pretty naive. So I didn't have, I wanted to have fun, and I didn't know anything about drugs because I was raised in a pretty religious household and I was pretty sheltered. I was like a goody two-shoes, basically. And so she did not really have boundaries or rules, and I could drink alcohol with her. So we would smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. And it was like anything goes. She always said, the world is your oyster. Have fun. So we did. But, a little ways into this relationship and hanging out with her, I started to feel like I needed some discipline. And so I actually joined the military at this point, and that did not last because I drank and I got an underage drinking, and I ended up getting an administrative discharge. So when I went back, I don't think I've ever shared that part publicly, but for some reason it just came up. But when I got out of the military, I went back to her and I stayed with her, and she was grooming me at this point. So she was telling me about her experience with working as a prostitute in New York and normalizing it. And then we were drinking, and then she introduced drugs. So my timeline around these events kind of gets muddled up, but I remember her demonstrating how to smoke methamphetamines and then passing me the pipe and saying, you'll like it. Just do it like that. So I did. And then the point where I really kind of lost consciousness was when I drank GHB. She'd put GHB in my drink. And I guess she had worked out with this group of people who were running a brothel out of the city to have me work for them. So she traded me, and they supplied her drugs, cocaine, meds, and that was like months of in and out of consciousness. And I remember some things here and there, but I was a commodity. And then the point when I got out was I regained consciousness in a studio apartment, and there was a man and woman on the bed, and they were unconscious, and the door was boarded shut from the inside. So I had a challenge getting out of there. But once I got out, I called for help, and I got into a safe house for women leaving their traffickers. So it was an 18-month program, and I lasted 6 months. It was a good time. They gave me a lot of opportunities while I was there. So like I remember I played piano, and I would teach some of the girls in the house to play piano. I'd have piano lessons, and they got me into music school. So I would play the trumpet in the afternoons on the roof of this house. It was cool. And, sometimes I wish I could have lasted the whole time and not, kind of ruin that opportunity. But I realized that I really didn't know what was happening on a physiological level based on my experience. So I encountered this trauma, and 6 months into this program, I got hit with an overwhelming amount of rage, and I had to get away from it. It was like the start of running away from myself, which I didn't understand was impossible. So I just left. I left. I got on a plane to the East Coast, and I started working again. So it was a cycle for about a decade of drinking every day and using drugs at some points, especially later on, and just working. And it was like this cycle of addiction. And I had just developed these pathologies almost because I didn't understand what happened or how to fix it. And so I guess, my spiritual journey happened when I was at the end of my rope, and my life was falling apart. I had lost my mind, and I was just at the end of my rope where I just couldn't function and live the way I'd been living. And I didn't know what to do except surrender. So that's what I did. And when I surrendered, I slowly regained clarity. And that's what That was like in 2019, so 2024. So that was 5 years ago now. And slowly over time, I've gotten to the point where I'm here sharing this story.
Wow, Lauren, I'm so sorry. I know your name is Sarah. I just keep looking over at my notes. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so sorry, human to humanist, for what you had to go through. It just, as a mother myself, I just cannot fathom why parents, I mean, I'm sure that they're coming from a completely different perspective. And I know that your mother had her own trauma and her own addictions, it sounds like, but nobody should have to go through that.
Yeah, it's funny that you keep calling me Lauren because that was my name when I was born.
Really?
Yeah, so I didn't change it. It was Lauren Sarah, and I didn't change it around until adoption court. I was so little, but I just woke up that morning and announced to my family, by the way, my name's Sarah now. And I would not respond to Lauren. So part of the healing journey that I've been through has been inner child work.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're calling me Lauren, it's almost like you're talking to my inner child. It's interesting.
Wow, that is interesting. So I'm sure that you've had quite a journey of healing from all of the trauma that you underwent. I mean, from being trafficked to being adopted in and of itself can be a trauma, and everything that you went through with your mother. And something interesting is that you mentioned when you went through this 18-month program, you made it to about 6 months and then you got hit with this rage. And that's something that I hear from people and have experienced to a degree myself as well, just being hit with these overwhelming emotions that are trapped in your nervous system and not knowing how to handle it. So in the course of your journey of healing, did you discover how to deal with and heal those emotions that you were experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to identify if the healing starts on a spiritual level or a biological level. Like, what plane does it begin? I'm not really sure, but maybe the decision right before I kind of fell apart, I was taking an antidepressant that I was prescribed. So I had reached out for help, but it made everything so much worse. And when I'm surrendered, I decided I'm not ever going to take pharmaceutical drugs again. And I think after a period of time of not being on any substances, I regained my ability to learn how to effectively manage things, to learn new techniques. So the rage, it's really just been the past few years that I've learned things that really help, like breathing, meditation, emotional freedom techniques like tapping. And then now I'm studying more embodiment practices. So realizing that, okay, when an emotion like rage gets trapped in the body, in the nervous system, like you said, it's going to manifest as some kind of a disease in most cases, unless you complete the stress response cycle. So learning how to do that, like through the felt sense is like, okay, something has happened to make me angry. And so let me identify where in my body that anger is, and then breathe into it. And then you can, like, the inner child thing comes up. So, okay, or maybe the inner teenager or something, whatever stage that something happened to make you angry, you can kind of go back to that point and ask yourself, like, okay, what part of me is responding to this? Because it's not my present current self that is responding to the situation with rage, because the situation doesn't really warrant that level of emotion. So then I can maybe identify, like, okay, when I was 19, I was a commodity and I couldn't run away or defend myself. And that made me really angry. And I feel trapped in this situation right now. And it's making me angry because I feel claustrophobic. And it's triggering that part of me that was trapped all those years ago in that moment. And so I can almost like go back as my present self in time to that moment and breathe through it and provide the support that I wanted but didn't get in that moment to be able to heal that aspect of myself. So clearly, I'm still learning these techniques and everything, but it's just amazing that there's so much information available to us at this time so that we can relearn how to heal ourselves.
That technique that you just walked us through is so powerful. It's a different variation of anything I've ever heard where you're saying, recognize that the present day you is not having this reaction, but it's a younger version of yourself. So you can go in and give that younger version of yourself the support that they didn't get when they needed it.
Yeah. And this experience, people say, I'm so sorry you went through that. And I'm sorry for anybody that's been through something similar, of course. And at the same time, I kind of have adopted this belief that before I was born, I chose to go through certain things so I could overcome them to help other people overcome similar things, because I think the underlying issue has kind of infiltrated every layer of our society, and that's attacking our freedoms.
I would love to hear a little bit more about that. I've heard you speak about how collectively we are all enslaved, and I love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'm still getting an understanding for the extent of it because it's hard for me to understand everything. I don't know everything. I don't know anything. A lot of days I'll learn something and then I'll learn something else. And it's just constantly changing. But I feel like what's happening is we're being programmed, like, to believe certain things are normal. So many things, like dysfunctional families. So there's like generational trauma because, like in the case of my biological mother, she had a background that lowered her ability to function in a normal, well way. And so the cycle continues until somebody stands up and says, this is the end of it. Like, I'm going to figure this out. So slavery is like, obviously human trafficking is a big deal. It's overseas, the movie The Sound of Freedom really did a good job highlighting the issue of human trafficking overseas and especially children. And it's also in our backyards in the United States. Look at the foster children that are trafficked, that run away, that are targeted, offered drugs, and then they're addicted to drugs, and then the cycle continues. Look at Hollywood. Look at all these stories. Like, I think I saw something earlier about Amanda Bynes and something that she had been through with her biological father. So it's not just that our family units are kind of not normal and disintegrating, but it's also just individuals, especially people that are susceptible to manipulation. So low income people or people with trauma, like foster care individuals, and then even just people who have mental issues. So much of this is an attack on the mind. And the attack on the mind goes hand in hand with our physiology, because we don't have the cognitive capacity to navigate reality and create a healthy life, a well life, if we're lacking nutritional support, because nutritional support ties in with cognitive ability.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many things going on in our society, like you said, that we're being programmed to accept these things as normal because we're just kind of raised into this whole system. And I'm starting to become more and more aware of things that I just didn't even think about before. And like you said, the food is one thing that I think a lot of people are aware of. I mean, our food is poisoned by pesticides and whatever else is being put into it, and we're not getting the nutrition that we need, and that affects us mentally and spiritually. And then there's just so many other things like, the schooling system, the banking system, how almost everything is set up. It's like we're slaves to the systems and we can't even see it because we just accept it as normal.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up education because I'm 35 years old and I'm learning things that are life changing and incredibly liberating at this stage in my life that I didn't even know existed when I was in school. And I was, I had a pretty good education during my childhood, but what are our children learning in schools? Like even math is different. I don't know if you know that, but the math that they're teaching in school is not the math I learned. And then like religious studies and history, like what about what I learned in history as a child is actually true?
Right.
Are we programmed to believe a certain storyline that perhaps is not true? And one of the things I've learned is that all the information I need is actually stored in my body. My body is so incredibly intelligent. And so the more, like so many sacred texts talk about your body is a temple of God. Well, I have found that, it's almost like things are written on a cellular level that I can access, but not be consciously aware of all the time.
There's so many different directions we could go, and I don't know what question to ask next, but let's go with that last thing you mentioned, that everything that you need is like coded into your body. What are some of the things, like the information that your body is carrying that you have access to?
That's a hard one because like I feel like I'd still drop in and out of remembrance. And I think the act of accessing that information within your body is remembrance. And I feel like that's the key to freedom. So, like, remembering who I am. That was one of the first epiphanies I had by going within. I asked myself the question. I decided I wanted to know who I am. And I wanted to meet my higher self because I had learned this concept, which I never read in the Bible growing up in church. And so I wanted to know more. And I asked myself until I got an answer. And it was by going within and accessing that information that I remembered who I am, which is beyond Sarah Lauren, because before I was Sarah Lauren, I am. So there's like this intelligence within my beingness that is eternal.
Yeah, so well said. Another thing you mentioned that is really interest to me, you were talking about the schooling system and specifically how history is what we were taught in history. A lot of it isn't even true. This is something that I'm realizing because my kids are now in grade school and I'm homeschooling them. And so I'm going through US history with my two boys who are in 3rd and 4th grade and having all of these realizations of how we were. I mean, I would imagine that most countries probably like write their history through their lens, like with them as the victors. But that's definitely what happened with American history. Like, so much of it is just completely whitewashed and completely, the perspective you can tell has been twisted.
Yeah. And then when you look at history and education, what we're taught, one of the things that's, I guess, in the scientific realm that we didn't grow up with an understanding of was the quantum nature of reality. There's something about the choices I make on a day-to-day basis that changes my reality. So in a way, you can't really just write it in a book and read the book and it's always that. Because it's like everything is connected in time, and it's more cyclical than linear, just like space, right? We live on a globe. I think time works the same way, and parallel realities, I think, people are educated enough to realize there's multiple universes, multiple realities. Quantum physics is basic. People have at least a basic understanding of it. And so who's to say we're not, based on our choices, jumping into different realities, like so fast that we don't even notice it happening, just like the earth spins so fast we don't even notice it moving.
Yeah, I 100% believe that, because I've interviewed near-death experiencers who are given a choice on what timeline they want to come back into. And I even spoke to someone recently who chose to come back into a different timeline than she had left from, and she could feel like those memories of the previous lifetime leaving her mind when she came back in. And I've also spoken to people who have seen, like you're saying, that time is cyclical. It's not linear, it's cyclical, and it's all happening in this eternal now. And so it makes sense when you think about it like that, that our choices and changes that we make in the quantum field could affect the past too, just as much as the future.
Right. And that's honestly one concern that I've been mulling over just about sharing my story, because I'm like, well, how does my past tie in with my future? And I don't know. It's like the more I learn, the more I don't know. And I just wonder more about the words I say and their significance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Do you think that we could change our past without even realizing that we've done it, because we would move forward with new memories of the new past that we created?
That's true. I think for now, though, the underlying message is still it's relevant to the times that we're living in now, because we still need to kind of work together and support each other in reclaiming our power and our sovereignty. I don't know if you've heard this alternate version of history, the history of humanity, but like maybe one possibility is that in ancient Egypt, we kind of had our power and our sovereignty at one point, and maybe we could had like more perceptive abilities, like the ability to perceive auras, and like maybe we had golden auras around us like a crown, until a group of entities came in and took our power from us, like maybe the pharaohs. And that's the start of the patriarchy and this separation, this separateness ideology that we are separate from God, that we're separate from each other. Maybe that was the start.
That's really interesting. Everything seems to go back to ancient Egypt. Like, there's definitely something going on there. So, in your opinion, what can we do now to wake up to our own power and sovereignty first, and to help others awake also?
I would say cultivate practices that allow you to connect with your inner world, like your body, your heart. So it could be different, like different things resonate with different people. But I have found like doing a heart meditation in the morning is really helpful. And then I'm trying to incorporate more movement like yoga. I feel like that's important and I don't know why. But just, pick maybe one or two things that you do on a daily basis that help elevate your spirit and your state of mind so that you can operate on a higher frequency, I guess. I'm trying to choose my words wisely, but I think that's the right word to use here. And, just focus on healing yourself. So one of the things that happened early on for me was I suddenly had these biological intuitions to drink pure water. It's like I instinctively knew there was heavy metals and toxins in the water. So I got a distiller and I started distilling my own water from home. So I started to pay attention to what I was drinking and what I was eating. So not just obviously getting rid of the cocaine use, if that's what you're doing. Like that's an obvious thing, but more than that, okay, what are the ingredients I'm consuming and where are they sourced? If I'm eating meat, is that meat from a cow that was traumatized? Because if I'm eating meat from a cow that was traumatized, I'm going to be taking on some kind of negative energy that is not going to help me put my body in balance and be in a state of balance and be having good thoughts running through my mind so that I'm creating a better reality. And that's why I don't drink cow's milk anymore. So just little things, I think, just be aware and follow your inner guidance, because no outside person is going to be more in alignment with your truth than yourself.
I love that. That's really practical advice. And to your point about the yoga, there's a couple things that come to mind for me why that could be beneficial. And the first one is because I know that movement can be a somatic practice that can help get you into your body and move emotions and traumas through your nervous system. And then the other thing is that with yoga, it's very specific postures that are designed to move energy up your spine and contribute towards self-realization.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm studying that, so I don't really have a whole lot of background to speak on it because I'm not an expert, but there's something about the nadis, the energy bodies in your body and connecting them that gives you seemingly superhuman ability.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And, the knowledge that some of the ancient people had that put together these practices.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to think about, like I was saying about space and time being interconnected. Like if you think of, just try it on for a minute to see if it resonates, time being cyclical, then our ancient past and our distant future could be the same. So it makes sense that ancient knowledge would be revolutionary at this time.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought of that. So you mentioned drinking pure water, movement. What other practices have you used on your healing journey? You mentioned the food.
Okay, so I've studied a little bit about herbs. Like I just have a basic understanding of a lot of different subjects. But a few years ago, I did my first parasite cleanse because I had realized that even with doing like positive affirmations and focusing on my thoughts, I was still having negative thought patterns. And it felt like they were almost outside, like my biology was not influencing them somehow. So I figured out how to use wormwood clove and black walnut hull to get rid of parasites in the body. And it's, the first couple of times I had to really watch my weight because I've always struggled to gain weight. Like I'm a healthy weight now, but the last parasite cleanse I did, I lost like 15 pounds. So I was underweight. So that's the only side effect I noticed. But, you can learn about it on different YouTube channels, how to do a parasite cleanse. And there's certain things that you take that provide the nutritional support while your body is going through this intense process, like magnesium, potassium, and iodine, that combination. So if you took like the wormwood with black walnut and clove in it 3 times a day, one of those times you want to take minerals that support your body's internal function. I have found that combination and more to be in a sea moss capsule. And then another thing you want to take for support is Chanca piedra or some kind of a stone breaker in case you get kidney stones. And then a probiotic or enzyme combination, because enzymes really assist your body, the different functions of your body. Because I believe that part of this enslavement programming that we're under is attacking our systems, our body systems with parasites. And so this just kind of, it's like when you fight the war in your body, you win the war in your life because you're doing the inner work. And then all of a sudden you'll see like almost people, places, and things that have a parasitic quality in your outer existence fall away like magic. So parasite cleanse and anything that you can do to repair on a cellular level. Like you might, if you have a holistic doctor or something, you can partner with them on this. I collaborate with my healthcare professionals. I don't let them dictate to me. I think just maintaining that level of sovereignty in every aspect of your life is super important.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'd also like to ask you about your psilocybin-assisted healing. Would you like to get into that and share a little bit of your journey?
Sure, yeah. I never know if we're going to talk about that or not, but I'm glad we brought this up.
Oh, good.
It's like that secret ingredient that has worked so well for me. So a couple of years after I decided to heal and surrendered my will and everything, I'm learning a lot. I'm reading ancient texts. And along the way, somebody asked if I had tried psilocybin, and I didn't know what it was. I think there had been one time I had had a magic mushroom, but I didn't know what it was then. Like I didn't know the significance of it. So I did a lot of research and I watched Paul Stamets' video, Fantastic Fungi. And I decided, okay, I'm going to try this. So I was able to do a psilocybin-assisted therapy journey. And I was told that it's very important the setting that you're in, the mindset that you have, and your intention. So I made sure, I was in a good mood and everything. I was in a good headspace. And I wrote down a prayer to be my intention. I'm trying to remember the prayer. It was something like, take away my difficulties so that victory over them may bear witness of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And that was my prayer. And it had an effect of kind of like stripping away my ego. Ego can be like pride, but also overthinking what people think about me. It's almost like this self-consciousness, which I tend to struggle with. So I'll just describe what happened in the experience. It felt like I was like going up a roller coaster. I knew that there was going to be a point where I might hit what people call the black mirror, which is scary. It's like this, you're confronted with something hard in your psyche that needs to be dealt with. So it started out, almost like altitude sickness. I got super giggly. And then after that period, I kind of descended quickly. I was faced with a feeling. I felt everything. It wasn't like I necessarily had a visual representation of what was happening, like scenes of my life, like a movie flashing before me. That didn't really happen. It was more like I felt in a moment all of the pain and horror I had ever been through in this lifetime in a moment. It was like right there in front of me. And my guide said, okay, now you have a choice. You go into it or you run away from it. And I knew if I chose to run away from it at that point, like I might have some negative psychological implications behind that choice. So I chose to go into it, and it was like I became my most horrible experiences. I felt it all. But then I moved it, like it dissipated. So because I embraced it, I had the power to release it. And when I released it, it was like literally a veil lifted. It felt like that. It felt like so much came off my shoulders, and I was so light. And then the experience I had was the same experience I had when my daughter was born, which was I felt like my whole life had been a dream. I was asleep prior to that moment. I was waking up from a dream. And I remember telling my guide, this is the second time I've woken up from the dream. And, my guide was like, that's so sad. And I thought about it, like, I realized so many things in that moment. And I was like, yeah, it is sad. It's sad that the majority of humanity doesn't have this level of consciousness. I don't right now in this moment. I don't feel like I'm awake right now. I'm remembering an experience of being awake, but it's not a constant thing. I haven't figured that out yet. But it's available. I realized in that moment that all the petty little grievances I had with people in my daily life were completely meaningless. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, that scripture I read, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. This is what he was talking about. Their brainwaves are vibrating at such a low frequency, they literally don't know what they're doing because they're running on a program. And we all are at some point. We are all enslaved. And so after that profound experience, it was like, because I took the and used it to integrate trauma and work through it and create neural pathways and release burdens, all of a sudden, I ignited my biological ability to intuit certain things, which is when I realized that, oh, I got to drink clean water. Oh, I got to drink not traumatized cow milk. So those realizations that I had from that one experience allowed me to level up, allowed me to reclaim more of my natural state of health. And now every time I do it, I get more and more realizations. And it's a journey. And I feel like at this stage of my journey, I have to give back so I can keep the progress I've got. Because I can't just solo speed ahead and try to reclaim this natural state of being in my power and having my golden aura activated, my chakras. I've got to reach back to the people behind me who maybe don't know or haven't had some of these experiences and say, you know what, this happened. It worked for me. And some of these things might sound totally crazy to people. They would have to me prior to 5 years ago. But look at how amazing and it is that this amount of change can happen and how quickly it can happen.
Your story is so inspiring, and just how you put the work in to heal. So I have to ask you about your experience of waking up from the dream. What does it feel like to be awake?
That hit me when you were talking about your experience. You made that video 3 years ago about connecting to source.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everything you said in that, I was like, yep, that's it. And it's like, what does it feel like to wake up? It's really hard to find the words because words are they create more confusion in a way. So it's how do you even, it's like everything you've believed or been operating in just falls away, and you realize love is the answer. Like, it's the whole reason for everything, to experience love, like to remember who we are and experience love.
Yeah, it is impossible to put it into words because you're trying to describe an experience that we don't have in this paradigm. So it's kind of like trying to describe a new color that isn't in the color spectrum. How do you put words to something that most people haven't seen or experienced?
Yeah, I read somewhere that when the Spanish were arriving in South America, based on our history books, to conquer the natives, the native people that lived there had never seen a ship before. So they didn't have any concept for what a ship looked like. So they actually didn't see the ships that were coming. So I forget where I heard this story, but at some point, one of the Spanish people who had been on one of the ships had to describe the concept of a ship and what it looked like to one of the natives and work with them to train them to be able to perceive, so that eventually they knew what a ship was and they recognized it and they could perceive it. But it's interesting that if we've been running on programs our whole lives and believing certain things and been programmed to believe history, math, science, whatever it is, and we don't have a concept of divine reality or truth, then we can't describe it. And so that's what we are relearning, those of us who have had these experiences.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And it just goes to show that awakening to higher realities is really a shift in perception. Like you were saying, they didn't know how to perceive the ships. It's a awakening to be able to sense things that have always been there, but we just haven't been able to see them.
Yeah, it's like I realized a few times, I always realize now when I go there, oh my God, heaven is here already. Oh my gosh, like we've been in heaven the whole time. I just couldn't see it. I had no idea. So how do you remove the negative stuff to uncover your true essence and just be in heaven where we already are?
Wow, yeah, that's the question. Do you have any thoughts on that beyond what you've already shared?
How do you do it? I know it's got something to do with being in a natural state of wellness. From my experience, I think that has a lot to do with it. And I'm sure those of us interested in doing this will continue to learn more and do it and receive help and support from each other.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I would like to change gears slightly for my final question.
Okay.
And go back to your childhood and the things that happened to you. And I just think that this is really important. I've heard you speak about how slavery is more rampant now than when it was legal. And I would love to know, and probably a lot of people listening, what can the average person do, practically speaking, to help put an end to human slavery and human trafficking?
Work on yourself. Free yourself. If you have some kind of an intuition that you're not operating on your full capacity, follow the little internal cues to get there, because from that level, you'll be able to see more clearly the slavery. I don't always see it every single minute of every single day, but, I'm confronted with opportunities to be able to do my part, and my part is different than someone else's part. It's kind of like we're all putting a big fire out together and there's a big bucket of water, and all I'm doing is taking the bucket from a person to my left and moving it to the person to my right. And that's just my role in it, but we all get to watch the fire go out together.
That's beautiful. We all have to play our part, and then we can tackle much larger issues. Well, Sarah, I would like to give you a chance to share where the viewers can find you and anything that you have going on that you'd like them to know about.
You can find me, all my social media handles, and I'm on pretty much all of them, are at I am Sarah Lauren. My website is iamsarahlauren.com. And you can get a copy of my book where I just talk about my story and getting out of it and my surviving experiences. So that book is Alchemizing Exploitation on my website. You can also sign up for my newsletter where I am organizing retreats for women who have sex trauma specifically and want to try assisted therapy. So it's only like 5 people at a time, but I am running weekend retreats and I am bringing in professional guides.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I love the title of your book, by the way. And I will have all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being willing to speak about your experiences, even though I'm sure it's difficult to speak about some of these things, and for sharing such an inspiring perspective with the rest of us.
Thank you, Melissa. It was an honor to be on the show.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.